Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Just a Few. My name is Patrick Antwine, and as usual, I use these videos to respond to a question that is posed to me requiring a biblical response. Today's question is a bit unusual because although I have my Bible with me, you'll find that I'm not going to be opening my Bible or referring to the Bible with my response because it's a question that doesn't really have biblical precedence, or I can't turn to the Bible and respond to the question as such. You'll see why. And I was tempted to say, listen, I'm not going to respond to a question like this, but I felt it was a fair enough question, and at least I should be allowed to take the opportunity to give my opinion. So that's what you'll find in this video. So let me jump to the question. This question says, should Christians get involved in politics? Of course, I can't go to the Bible and answer that, but I understand the person wants at least a Christian perspective, not necessarily a biblical reference. So this is what I'll be doing in this, in my response. I want to respond to that question by saying this. Politics, as it is in our culture here in, let's say, Trinidad and Tobago or the wider Caribbean, and to a certain degree, I would say from looking from the outside in, even in countries like the United States and Canada, it's similar. Politics has the potential to be very divisive, and let me say it this way, it can be very nasty. A dirty game is played with politics. Despite how mature people might be, there are times when you look at the politicians and you say they behave like cats and dogs fighting, or as we say in our culture, dog eat dog, or we also say like a bunch of crabs in a barrel fighting and clawing at each other. That's the reality of the political landscape that we find ourselves in. So the question again is, should Christians get involved in politics? The next thing to consider is that there are different layers of politics. There might be, for instance, in our culture here, there might be electoral politics in the sense of serving in the parliament and so on, parliamentary elections, or there might be electoral politics in the sense of serving at a local government level or a community level, serving as councillors and things of that nature. But regardless of the level of politics, there is some level of divisiveness about it, and you need to be very careful. So let me look at it from two perspectives now. If you're speaking of a person who is, let me use this term, I hope you understand what I mean, a regular Christian, you're not a pulpiter. You're a member of a church, you're a Christian in good standing, and you want to get in politics. My counsel, my advice to you is, I have no objections to something like that. If you believe that is God's call upon your life and God is calling you to get involved in it, there's nothing in the Bible that should stop you from getting involved. What I would ask of a person like that is that you will first consider the core values of the party that you are going to identify with, and you compare that with the core values of the kingdom of God, and ask yourself, will I be finding myself in conflict with the leadership of this party because of conflicts in values? And we're not talking about values that are written down in a manifesto or on paper somewhere and they say these are our values. We're talking what is demonstrated by the leadership historically in that party. Do I subscribe to those values? If you're a part of a party that endorses abortion, for instance, how is that going to be reconciled with your biblical position? And I'm just using that as one example, but you need to look at the values of the party in general, or specific values, I should say, and ask yourself, will I run into conflict with my own conscience saying I can't support those values? So you need to keep that in mind before you find yourself in supporting a party whose values you may not agree with. because of your kingdom perspective. And the next thing is, what's your purpose? Why do you want to get involved in that way? And you need to search your heart and ask yourself, what really is your motive? Is it just because you want to be noticed, you want to be popular, or is it that you really have a servant's heart? And then I would ask you, can you serve in your local church or in some para-church organization and accomplish that same purpose? Why do you see politics as a vehicle through which your servant's heart can express itself? You need to work that out between yourself and God and really question your motives. What's your purpose? Why do you want to get involved in politics? And could those objectives that you have in your heart be accomplished within some part of the work of the church, in meeting social needs and things like that? There are lots of para-church organizations that could facilitate that, and you need to work that out. You need to understand the program of God also for the church and for mankind. It is not, and I want to say this very clearly, it is not God's intention to reform this present world system. God has already, Jesus said in John 17, I pray not for this world, but for them that you have given me from the world. If we think that getting involved in politics is somehow going to clean up party politics, you are disillusioned. That is not even the purpose of the church. The church is to preach the gospel. Individuals from all across society can come into the kingdom of God. The purpose of the church is not to reform society. Jesus isn't going to come back to get a upgraded version of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and some communist aspects and pull it all together and say this is the ideal system. No, all of that is going to be done away with, because all of them are corrupt and evil at its core. They are human. The kingdom of God is not of this world. So don't you dare think that you're going to go in there and you're going to bring about a Christian presence and somehow it's going to Christianize that party and the values of the kingdom of God are going to be embraced. I know too many people, Christian leaders who have to come to shortly, who go in there with that mindset, pastors who get involved in politics locally, and they tell their congregation and they tell fellow ministers, hey, we're going to go in there and take the kingdom to those people. And they go in there bold as a lion, and they come out very quiet as a kitty cat not long after, because they learn very quickly that when you go in there with your kingdom values, people embrace you very quickly at the front before the elections, because politicians have always used religion as a wedge to get to people. And as soon as they finish using you to open in prayer and to say something nice and so on, and they assign you to a position in the party, maybe you were elected, you learn very quickly that politicians have a way of getting rid of those who don't toe the party line. And a lot of ministers who I've seen in the past gotten involved in politics, oh yeah, we're going to go in there, and very soon the lion stops roaring, and you have a nice, gentle kitty cat in the party, and before long, they get rid of you. I have been invited on a number of occasions over the years as a pastor to come at political meetings and say a prayer, opening prayer representing the Christian community. I have said no to every one of them because I cannot identify the church with party politics. I'm sorry, I can't. So, let me close by speaking, if you're a Christian and you feel that's what God has called you to, and you examine your heart and you want to get involved, understand there's a thin line you're going to be walking on, because as soon as something goes wrong, people identify you with the church more than with that party, and the church end up getting a bad name. If you, however, are a church leader, a pastor, a pulpiteer, an evangelist or something, I want to warn you against getting involved in electoral politics, and I'll tell you why. You're going to have members of your congregation from all across the political spectrum. How are you going to shepherd those people when they see you identifying with one political party and they might not belong to or subscribe to the values of that political party? And they have to now listen to biblical counsel from you, and they somehow are expected to separate who they see you as on the political scene from who they see you as with a Bible in your hand. It's impossible for members of a congregation to do that, and you should not put them through that. stay away from that environment of electoral politics. If you're a pastor, an evangelist, don't use your political, your social media platform to share your political views. And so you're going to alienate people from within the kingdom of God who don't share your political views. And I would discourage strongly pastors and evangelists and so on from getting involved in electoral politics. So that's my perspective on this. There's a distinction between if you're a quote-unquote regular Christian compared to those who are pulpiteers. I advise them totally differently. Those of you who think, well, use the Bible and you see Daniel and Joseph were politicians. No, they existed or lived in a time when it was an empire. It was a monarchy. Whatever the king says goes. It's not the same as our electoral system. They were chosen by a king, not by electoral votes. So keep that in mind when you think about Joseph and Daniel being quote-unquote politicians. Didn't use my Bible, but I vented a bit here. Please forgive me. That's how I would respond to a question such as that. If you have a question and you would like me to respond, please feel free to use the email address on your screen and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Until then, grace and peace be multiplied to you.